Halloween 1999, the Game Boy Color is in full swing, Pokemon fever is spreading across the globe, and handheld gaming is exploding with colourful ports, mascot spin-offs, and the occasional seasonal cash-in. Amidst all this, one of the strangest little racers you've probably never heard of quietly hit European store shelves. Halloween Racer, developed by the Belgian studio Visual Impact and published by Microids. It's a holiday-themed mascot racer released only in Europe, built in just a few short months, and meant to be an impulse buy during the Halloween season. At first glance, it's exactly what you'd expect from a quick tie-in, but once you play it, you realise it's actually not that bad. So to celebrate Halloween, today we're taking a look back at this odd little Game Boy Color title, its development, gameplay, design quirks, and its strange connection to Christmas, and even to a stealth sequel 2 years later. So buckle up, prepare to get jump scared, and let's dive in to Halloween Racer. So to understand Halloween Racer, we need to remember the gaming landscape of 1999. On consoles, Mario Kart 64 had already proven that cartoonish racing games could sell millions. Developers everywhere, from big publishers to tiny European studios, were rushing to create their own takes on the formula. The PlayStation had Crash Team Racing, Disney had given us multiple kart races with Muppet Race Mania, Toy Story Racer, Walt Disney's Magical Quest. There's quite a lot going on here. Even the Game Boy Color was home to racers like Micro Machines and Lego Racers. So if you were a mid-tier European developer with a few months before Halloween, what would you do? Well, you'd make a themed racer that could double as a cheap stocking stuffer, even though Halloween didn't really have stockings. And that's exactly what Visual Impact did. Now before we go any further, if you're a fan of racing games or niche retro racing games, then why not hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. And whilst you're at it, if you want to support this channel further, please check out my Patreon link in the description below, where you can get your hands on all sorts of cool stuff, like early access to videos and your name in the credits of every single release. Anyway, that's enough plugging the channel, let's get back to some spooky racing. Visual Impact was a small Belgian studio best known for churning out quick contract-based projects. They had worked with publishers like Infogrames, Microids and Ubisoft, often developing Game Boy Color titles under tight deadlines. They actually went on to work on one of my least favourite games of all time, the Burnout Legends DS port, which is just absolutely horrible. Anyway, Halloween Racer was no exception. The team reportedly developed it in just 3 to 4 months. The music was handled by Eden Sound and publishing duties were taken up by Microids, who saw it as a simple seasonal product. Released late in 1999, it was sold exclusively in Europe, mainly in France, Belgium and the UK. Which is weird really, because Halloween wasn't nearly as popular in Europe at the time as it was in the US. So to hedge their bets, Visual Impact decided to include a second holiday, Christmas, although you wouldn't see this on the box art or marketing. Yes, this Halloween game slowly morphs into a Christmas one the further you get. It's weird, but in a way it kind of works. So what about the story? Well, there isn't much of one. The idea is that the citizens of Halloween have organised a series of races in their spooky realm. A simple excuse for a lineup of cute themed racers. You've got 6 playable characters and they're all delightfully bizarre, including a witch on a broomstick, a knight standing on a floating shield for some reason, a scarecrow who hovers through sheer willpower, and leaning into that Christmas theme, a penguin riding on a snowman's head, just to name a few. They're quirky, cartoonish, and exactly the kind of mascots you'd expect to see on a Game Boy Color box in 1999. However, and this is where things get a bit odd, you never actually race against the other playable characters. Instead, you're thrown into races against a variety of NPC racers, like floating pumpkin heads, vampire bats, ghosts, UFOs, and even carnivorous plants. Later on, as you reach the Christmas portion, you'll see penguins and parka-clad snowball riders. The NPCs don't start at the same line as you, they're already scattered around the track, so part of the challenge is catching up. a design decision that makes Halloween Racer feel more like a time trial blended with arcade racing. Despite its humble origins, Halloween Racer offers a surprising amount of structure. There are two main modes: Championship, which is the main progression path, and Practice, which lets you practice on the tracks. Each mode can be played across 3 difficulty levels: Rookie, Advanced, and Expert. Rookie starts you off with 4 circuits: Vulcan, Egypt, Red Moon, and Mine across 8 different tracks. Advanced adds the Jungle Circuit for a total of 15 races, and Expert throws in the Ice Field, bringing the count to 18. Once you beat the Expert Championship, a bonus circuit called the Garden unlocks, but only in practice mode. To win championships, you need to finish at least 3rd in each race, fall to 4th place, or fail to reach a checkpoint before the timer runs out, and you'll have to spend a credit to continue. You earn these credits by picking up gems and overtaking opponents, a mechanic that adds a satisfying arcade layer to the formula. It's all held together by a classic retro password save system, where you're given a code after each championship. It's primitive but standard for handheld titles of the era. So what about the controls and handling? So here's where Halloween Racer genuinely surprises. Despite being a low budget game, the controls feel solid. There's a decent sense of speed, the turning is somewhat responsive, and once you learn the rhythm of each course, it's actually kind of fun to handle. Unlike some handheld races of the time, where your vehicle felt like it was sliding on ice, this one actually has a weird sense of weight and momentum, considering you're mostly floating off the ground. You can feel the game's designers working within the Game Boy Color's limitations, but still trying to capture a real racing flow. Each circuit introduces environmental hazards, such as cacti in the desert, but they all have the same standard hazards, such as cobwebs and snails which bring you to a halt. These are kinda cool in concept, but due to the limited draw distance, they can be quite frustrating to dodge. The challenge is fair, but engaging, with just some occasional frustration. It's not F-Zero, but it's far from broken as well. Visually, Halloween Racer makes good use of the Game Boy Color's limited palette. Each track has a distinct mood: fiery reds in the volcano stages, eerie blues and purples in the moon tracks, and dusty yellows in the desert circuits. The racers themselves are surprisingly expressive for such tiny sprites. You can make out their silhouettes clearly, and the backgrounds scroll mostly smoothly, which isn't always the case in Game Boy Color racers. Sure, some environments start to look samey after a while. That's unavoidable given the hardware and the fast development, but the overall presentation is cheerful and festive. It nails that late 90s handheld charm pretty damn well. The soundtrack, composed by Eden Sound, does a surprisingly large amount of heavy lifting here. It's bouncy, playful, and just a little spooky, kind of like Castlevania meets Diddy Kong Racing ran through an 8-bit filter. Each circuit gets its own theme, and while the Game Boy's sound chip certainly limits the complexity, the melodies are catchy enough to hum along to. As you reach the Christmas-themed circuits later on in the game, the music shifts, higher pitched chimes and a general wintry tone take over. It's a fun, unexpected tonal change that keeps the experience fresh. Sound effects are basic but serviceable, gem collection sounds, and the satisfying ding when you overtake an opponent. It's all simple, but it sells the atmosphere well enough. Now, if there's one thing that Halloween Racer does nail, it's the pacing. The rookie difficulty is forgiving, perfect for younger players or those just getting used to the controls and feeling. Advanced mode ramps up the competition, speed, and track complexity, and Expert pushes it further still, but not so much to the point where it feels unfair. Enemies start further ahead, checkpoint timers shrink, and credits become scarce. But as I say, it never feels unfair. The challenge escalates in a way that's actually satisfying. Replayability comes mainly from unlocking circuits and mastering each racer's handling quirks. Because there's no real story progression or unlockable endings, your motivation becomes skill improvement, and honestly, that's okay. This game was designed for quick sessions at a low price, not long campaigns. So how was Halloween Racer received critically? Well, it wasn't, really. There's almost no record of critical reviews from the time. It flew almost completely under the radar. I only managed to find 2 critical reviews through Moby Games, where the average works out at 55 out of 100. Most players who owned it probably got it as a random extra birthday present or handheld stocking stuffer later in the year. Maybe they picked it up on a whim at a toy store checkout counter for fairly cheap. But despite its obscurity, Halloween Racer didn't fade completely. In 2001, 2 years later, a sequel developed and published by Microids this time would surface under the name of Monster Racer, but this time it was on the PlayStation 1. As far as I can tell, there's no official connection, no branding, no shared logo, or anything in the marketing, but if you look closely enough, you'll see it's basically a stealth sequel. It's a fascinating little footnote in handheld history, 2 thematically different games secretly sharing the same DNA across 2 different platforms. Looking back now, Halloween Racer feels like a time capsule. It's a snapshot of the late 90s when small European studios could still produce oddball passion projects, games that were very clearly made under tight budgets, but with a sense of fun and experimentation. Yes, the tracks can get repetitive, the password system feels ancient, and the presentation is certainly rough around the edges, but underneath all that is a surprisingly competent racer, one that handles better than it has any right to, and manages to mix Halloween and Christmas without feeling totally ridiculous. For collectors, it's an obscure gem, not valuable but rare enough to be a fun conversation piece. For players, it's a brief, charming experience. You can finish a full championship in under an hour, but there's genuine enjoyment in mastering its handling and rediscovering a forgotten piece of Game Boy history. And who knows, maybe if you fire it up around Halloween, you'll feel a little of that 1999 handheld magic again. So that's Halloween Racer, a low-budget seasonal racer that somehow outperformed expectations, even if anyone hardly noticed. It's cute, clunky, and weirdly festive, and it's proof that even a rushed handheld game can leave a small but spooky mark on gaming history. If you ever stumble across a copy, give it a spin. You might be surprised at how decently it handles. So thank you very much for joining me on this look back at this weird little game. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications of my future uploads. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is Happy Halloween, and apparently Merry Christmas too. Bye bye.